This is Dateline News and Conversation. My guest tonight is a Russian-born American citizen, was raised for most of his life in Arizona. He went to the University of Arizona and eventually got a medical degree, and last summer returned to Russia. He's been on the show before. You know him, Dr. Lev Korovin. Lev, welcome back.
Good to see you, Regis. Actually, last summer was 2021, so that was a couple summers ago already. But time flies when you're having fun.
You know what? Time flies when you're having fun, pal.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, listen, it's great to have you back. You have a unique perspective on U.S.-Russia relations. Born in Russia, you grew up in the United States, you got your medical degree, and now you're back in Russia. You never were out of touch with your roots. So I want to begin tonight. We're going to stay on a geopolitical level rather than get down into the weeds about the war, special military operation, etc. In your opinion, is the United States isolating itself with its conduct across the globe? It's creating havoc everywhere, creating wars, local wars, extending Russia as much as it can. You have the BRICS plus a number of nations, just 6 or 7 nations just joined. There's another 20 or 30 lined up that want to join. How do you see this unfolding on a geopolitical scale? Is the United States isolating itself?
Well, the United States can isolate itself to the extent that a bull in a china shop can isolate itself. Unfortunately, it's a power in decline, but it's a superpower in decline. In that sense, it may be fair to compare it with the late Roman Empire. With regards to, we all know how it ended, but it was a decay, a decline that spanned a long time, and during that time, it did a lot of damage, both to itself and to its surroundings. I mean, overall, this situation that we have now, we've previously compared it to World War I, and I think that analogy is one that still very well holds true. Like at the root of it all, you have the law of uneven development under capitalism. So you have, on the one hand, a declining United States that's slowing down, that has to struggle more and more to stay at the same level that it was at previously, but at the same time, you have this economic powerhouse that China has turned into, which now, as can be expected, wants to convert that into being a geopolitical powerhouse as well, kind of to the same, in the same way that the German Empire in 1913 was obviously challenging the British Empire for hegemony then. Of course, the Brits at that time, they had a choice to make, which was either to accept this idea that some other power would become number one. And in that situation, it's not predetermined that you used to be number one, somebody moved in front of you, and now you're number two. It may not be the case at all. You might fall to number 4, number 5, which for the United States, with the position that it got used to would be equal to death. Okay, or you can destroy your competitor. Okay, and abort its growth, which is what was achieved fundamentally with World War One. Okay, it aborted the growth of the German Empire, and in that sense, this passage of the rising power over the declining one didn't happen. This kind of, in that sense, is what Washington is trying to achieve. To what degree is it isolating itself? Well, the world, overall is, at least, when you talk about the global South, it's very visibly tired of the United States, of this hegemony that it thinks that it's entitled to, that it's entitled to rule the world. When it says jump, the rest of the world is supposed to ask how high. Okay, that's something that the rest of the world is sick of, especially because it sees that it's not benefiting from it. But then the question is, well, what's it going to do about it? And at this point, the only power, kind of strangely enough, paradoxically enough, is doing something about it, is not the rising China, which you would think, well, it has all the cards, why doesn't it, play a hand? No, it's Russia, which, in many ways, you would think it's one of the least equipped countries to do this, but because because it's doing so, because it's showing decisiveness, the rest of the world in this global South, like we want to many people in Russia, and people who sympathize with us, we want to say, well, it's the rest of the world, and we're allying against the United States. Well, I mean, I would be more skeptical about that. I would say that the rest of the world right now is taking this anticipatory position. It wants to see how things are going to go. Okay, and depending on how things go, it'll kind of try to end up on the winning side when that winning side becomes apparent. I mean, you can. It's not necessarily the noble picture that you'd like to see, but I mean, you can. To a certain degree, you can't really blame them, because they have an instinct of self-preservation. So that's kind of the situation.
You mentioned that the United States empire is in decline and somewhat parallels the end of the Roman Empire. I have felt that for a long, long time now. It's characterized by corruption, a loss of focus, an alienation of the people, the impoverishment of the people. We see all of that happening in the United States today. And I've been reading for the last few months, but even recently, I think it was in the Financial Times, predicting that the United States will enter a recession by the beginning of the next year, 2024. From where you sit in Russia, I know most Russians that I know do not believe that America is in decline in any way, shape, or form. But do you see this coming recession as a real weakening of the American hegemon? I mean, what are your thoughts on the economy?
I think that on like a global, geopolitical level, the recession is going to be, I mean, irrelevant in the short term. What it may lead to, though, because I mean, regardless of you understand, right? There's economists can draw numbers, and based on that, they can talk about is it in a recession, or is there some kind of percentage growth or whatever. To a certain degree, that's irrelevant because people see their own lives and the lives of the people around them. And I mean, you can have the TV, spurt out all sorts of fancy macroeconomic indicators, but if you go to the gas station and it's consistently painful to fill up your gas tank. If you go to the grocery store and you in order to have just like basic sustenance end up coming out with a grocery bill over $100 without even getting anything less than basic. If you're a young person and you want to buy a house, forget it. It used to be something that Americans took relatively for granted, that you could move out, get a job and be a homeowner. Right now, forget about it. If you're in a big city and you're working, not in some very high level professional capacity, but if you just have a normal job that you used to have some sort of dignity attached to it, maybe you're one of these like striking automobile factory workers, right? You can't even barely afford rent anymore, right? I mean, with a situation like that, who cares if the TV is telling you that there's no recession? I mean, you feel the pain personally, okay? In a situation like that, okay, where on the one hand, people are feeling pain more and more, just from what's around them. But on the other hand, Washington has to gear up for a major military conflict that it's not going to be able to keep contained as a proxy war like it's doing with Ukraine right now. I mean, this American-Chinese confrontation has to come eventually. It's unavoidable. The threat that emerges, okay, the kind of, 2 + 2 leads to what, is that people who are put in a more and more desperate, financial situation, economic situation, sustenance, multiply that by the different, strange culture war things that are happening right now, become more and more receptive to kind of populist messaging. Populism can be very different. It can be good or bad. Okay, in and of itself, it's simply appealing to the common man as opposed to trying to go after interest groups or what have you. It's trying to appeal to the common individual. It's supposed to be you think a good thing, with the exception that of course different kinds of extreme right populism, for example. You have humanity's very painful experience. In the first half of the 20th century, first in Mussolini's Italy, then in Nazi Germany. Also, people were suffering, big time from wars around them. The Italians were impoverished. The Germans in Weimar Germany, okay, when you had to pay a million plus marks to buy a loaf of bread, okay, they were in pain. They were looking for something, to fix their problem, and they got this promise in the form of this mad Führer who then exterminated tens of millions of people. All right, and I think that the United States, with a combination of macroeconomics be damned, the life of the common man, okay, and this preparation for war is heading full steam ahead for something like this, for one form of Nazification or another. In this sense, this Ukrainian thing was only the beginning.
Russia and China apparently have come closer together over the last couple of years, but certainly very accelerated since the Russian special military operation in Ukraine. They apparently are together on many levels, including military, technology, development, the One Bridge, One Road, New Silk Road, etc. But something huge, I think, just happened. Kim Jong-un from the DPRK, North Korea, came to Eastern Russia. He met with Putin. He met with other high-level people in the government, in industry, and even the nuclear industry. Lev, I want to know what you think from where you're sitting. This meeting of Kim Jong-un and Russia and Putin, what significance does it have on a global level?
Well, for the previous 30 years, okay, of Russian foreign policy, at least from before the 24th of February 2022, Russia wanted to be, in one form or another, part of this system that the West was building, that the United States was building. It was trying to, with the attempts to keep a semblance of dignity or what have you, but it wasn't positioning itself actively as any kind of global alternative. It wanted to be part of this side that that have the power, right? And in that situation, if you asked a major Russian government bureaucrat, hey, who do you want to deal with, South Korea or North Korea? 10 out of 10 would have said South Korea. Okay. Now, life has changed. Okay. Many of these people in high places may not even realize to what extent life has changed. But, Putin at the very least sees that in a situation where the United States and its satellites, including South Korea, have declared one form of war against you or another, okay, let's not kid ourselves that this is some sort of isolated Russian-Ukrainian conflict. It's a proxy war of the entire West against Russia, and South Korea is participating in that. Majorly, it's signed up for all the sanctions. It's when it's asked to aid the neo-Nazi regime in Kiev, it'll do so with alacrity. I mean, who are we kidding? In that sense, you want to stop trying to come to some sort of relationship, trying to knock on locked doors and try to be friends with people who very obviously just don't want to be friends with you. And you have to value the friends that you have. Okay. The DPRK, first the Soviet Union, then Russia, it has a long history, together. It started with even World War II when Kim Jong-un's grandfather, Kim Il-sung, was amongst those who were fighting the Japanese, with Soviet assistance, and then that ended up blossoming into having this split Korea system, right? And the North Koreans, in a certain sense, have always been a bit more forward-looking than the post-Soviet Russian state, in the sense that they've preserved their military-industrial complex. Right now, there's work that's being done in Russia, don't get me wrong, but a lot more work has to be done in order to keep up with and outpace the combined military-industrial complex of the entire West, which is also going to be ramping up very sharply, because they have to equip not only the current proxy war now, they have to prepare for this global showdown with China. Okay, and if there's one thing that this current special military operation is showing anybody, is that modern intermediate war eats through munitions, eats through weapons much faster than anybody was ever used to. Of course, Russia figured out, that it has to ramp up, its production. It has to, look to additional sources to make sure that the troops have what they need in order to get the job done. But it was a major surprise for the Americans too. I think partially because they didn't expect everything to last so long. They thought that Russia was much weaker internally, and for this reason, they thought that the Russian front would collapse, not necessarily because of some sort of Ukrainian military gains, but because of internal unrest within Russia. And they thought that, well, if you combine battlefield gains in Ukraine with a fragile situation in Russia, then you get what you need, and you don't have to work so hard. And then the next situation you have is that, well, Russia collapses, the Russian-Chinese border becomes essentially another border that's under American control, and that's a very good position to wage this showdown against China with, because the clock is ticking. They have to move at one point or another. Now, okay, in Ukraine, the much touted Ukrainian offensive that was supposed to happen has generated a little more than many tens of thousands of dead Ukrainian military. Okay, it's eating through money and resources of the West. It's eating through time. Okay, Washington thought that at this point, when this whole thing was about to begin, when they were playing their calculus in the end of 2021 and the beginning of 2022, that this would all be over by now. That they would be, in the position to deal with their main existential threat as they see it. Now they're losing time and are sitting in a much weaker position that they would. So right now we're faced with a new arms race, not simply Russia versus the United States, but of the combined West with Russia and whoever is wants to support us with a little bit more than just wishful words. Which, in that sense, of course, both the contribution of Iran and the contribution of DPRK, North Korea. I mean, it's a big deal.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is a very big deal. The rapprochement with North Korea, Iran, other independent countries in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, for example. I think it is a big deal. I have never bought into the concept of a proxy war in Ukraine. I'm of the belief that the United States for decades has been ramping up its attacks on the Soviet Union and then the Russian Federation. They haven't ceased. They've got increasingly more belligerent and hostile. The rhetoric has become more hostile. And for them to keep repeating that Russia illegally invaded Ukraine is just an out-and-out lie. It's very mendacious. All of it has been very mendacious. Russia has been seriously provoked for decades. And, they can say it's a proxy war. But, it just reported yesterday or the day before that the Russians blew up a German Leopard tank, and the crew were all Germans.
German army, Bundeswehr.
German army.
They weren't even mercenaries. They were
German army.
Just that, yeah.
And I know for a fact there have been American military people, boots on the ground, Canadians, boots on the ground, UK boots on the ground, French and others, including Poles, many Poles, maybe thousands. And to call this a proxy war, to me, is just not calling it what it is. It's an out-and-out war of the United States declining empire against Russia, which right now is the only country that has been able to militarily counter and defeat the resources of NATO and the United States. Now, I think this is huge, but Lev, what I really think is going on, and what we started talking about, is the United States isolating itself from the rest of the world. If we look at this from a geopolitical perspective, I believe, and I want your opinion on this, that this is the epic, the epic battle for control of the future order of the world between a declining hegemon, the United States, and a new world that appears to be emerging. You can call it a multipolar world, a more fair world, a world that is going to adhere to the strict interpretation of international law and the UN Charter. Do you see this on that level as the epic battle between two poles for the future order and control of the planet?
I think this is the beginning of an epic battle that is going to last if we're lucky, the better part of the 21st century. If we're lucky in terms of that, if it's going to continue, it means that there's our side, okay, which, I mean, you can talk about declining U.S. all you want, but we know that, you know, Russia's the underdog here. I mean, it's not even something that's worth arguing about. I think that it's not something that is going to end with Ukraine. Okay, this is simply the beginning of a series of flashpoints and a series of major wars that at one point or another is going to culminate into something that is going to be truly world order changing. Okay, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily apply any kind of you know, rose-colored glasses to a multipolar world. I mean, multipolar world is simply what the world has always been prior to 1945. Okay. Before that, the world was always multipolar. The emergence of two major superpowers changed it to a bipolar one, which to a degree, while it lasted, was more stable. And you can argue that the Cold War, because we had this balance of power, saved much more lives than you know, could have been potentially taken in a different situation. We are coming back to, you know, the multipolar world, I would say now. Okay, it's already multipolar. Okay, and because of that, okay, we're having what we're having. Okay, in that situation, well, there's nothing to do but win. You have to win.
Wow, that's interesting. I kind of thought that it was all being played out right now, and with the powerful forces in the West and the United States being threatened with a loss of their domination, might do something totally radical and unthinkable. And people are talking about it now on both sides. Mm-hmm. Will somebody be crazy enough to push the button, or will some accident happen, a misjudgment that could lead to the unthinkable?
That's why I'm saying, if we're lucky, this is going to last for decades and decades.
If we're lucky.
Because if we're unlucky, it's going to end painfully much quicker.
Yeah, I agree. I want to finish on this note, Lev. You know, since Russia was deceived over the Minsk agreements, that the West had no intention of those agreements being honored. It was a period of time when Ukraine was rearmed and prepared and trained to launch an offensive against Russia, the Donbass. But since that time, the rhetoric coming from Russia, from Putin himself, he said things like, we're moving east. The West is not to be trusted. America cannot be trusted. And instead of talking about our partners in the West and in America, Putin started talking about unfriendly countries. And just last week at the United Nations, Putin did not go to give a speech. It was Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister, a brilliant man. I think he stands alone on the world stage in terms of the consummate diplomat. He come out and he called the United States untrustworthy. He called it an empire of lies. I know you're familiar with that speech. You and your international media site, um, Rosa Primavera, which I want to put the link to that site on this video. What was your take on Lavrov's speech at the United Nations?
Oh, it's. I think it was Confucius who said that the first step to overcoming a catastrophe is to call things by their proper names and to say those names in all the marketplaces where, at that time, the marketplace was where you went in order for everybody to hear you. At this point, we can say finally that we, in the form of the president and through the foreign minister, are calling things by their proper names. Okay, in that sense, if you're fighting an empire of lies, then the only way that you can win is with the truth, and that's part of it.
Obviously, I believe that Russia has taken that position, and I think very publicly on the global platform. I think Russia, as you said, is finally calling things as they are, calling out the United States on a number of different levels. Forget about the West, forget about NATO. It's the powerful forces in the United States that are driving this agenda, and I think you would agree. Do you think that Russia is doing everything it can to avoid as everybody's saying, a direct war with NATO or the United States?
I think it's going to, very great lengths in order to do that. You can even argue that, are we being excessively prudent with the current situation? That perhaps, again, part of this whole, calling things by their proper names is, of course, calling somebody's bluff. You know what I mean? And in a situation where the other side is, trying to, kind of, part of the modern war is not only on the battlefield, it's not only in the economical realm, it's not only in the political realm, it's also the picture that you're painting. It's the informational realm, and the West is doing a lot of things that are trying to make us look weak, we can't guarantee necessarily the security of people who are our allies, or people who simply have placed their trust in us. And again, if it's an empire of lies and it's spewing out lies, then you have to fight those lies. A, with the truth, and B, with action. Okay. So it's a very, let's say, a very delicate and very high stakes balancing act, because on the one hand, nobody wants a world-destroying nuclear exchange, but on the other hand, okay, you do not want to come off, and I'm making this pause deliberately to kind of be very precise here. You don't want to come off as somebody who fears death more than your adversary, because it's in that situation, okay, where one can say, well, you're afraid of death and I'm not, and therefore I deserve to be the master and you deserve to be the slave. Okay, that is an unacceptable position. Okay, in that sense, okay, if you're playing a this kind of game of chicken, this game of geopolitical chicken, you have to play it. Okay, it's a very hard game to play, but again, you have no choice but to win, because everything else is going to be either death or something much worse.
Well, Washington continues to escalate almost on a daily basis the threats and direct attacks on Russia, one day after another, crossing another Russian red line. You had mentioned that Russia has shown incredible restraint in this geopolitical game. But as we look at what's happening in the neighborhood, in the region, the United States right now has been stirring up trouble in Armenia with Azerbaijan. Turkey is involved in that. Israel is involved in that. And Iran. And that's why Israel's involved. And there are massive protests. There are armed conflicts going on between Armenia and Azerbaijan as we speak today. At the same time, the United States is involved with NATO in Serbia and Kosovo. There's been violence breaking out there. The United States has been trying, I think, to distract Russia, to exhaust Russia, to spread Russia thin with all of these moves. And yet Russia continues to play this, as you said, very delicate and dangerous game. I don't think Russia's playing chicken, but a dangerous game of trying to avoid the unthinkable. Your thoughts?
Well, I don't know how much time we have to talk about Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Nagorno-Karabakh. It's something with a very long backstory. And it was one of the first flashpoints that came up in the late 80s while the Soviet Union still existed. It was one of the triggers for its collapse, one might argue. And right now, what we have, I mean, it's something you can see it from a mile away. Washington isn't doing anything new right now. It's simply dusting off old plans that were drawn up under Jimmy Carter and then under Ronald Reagan, which is the idea of destroying the Soviet Union by clashing national minorities against each other and building this so-called ring of fire around the Russian heartland. And I mean, right now you have the Armenian flashpoint that has started burning again. The next step, and this is just, you know, the writing is just on the wall. The next step is going to be the reignition of other frozen conflicts in the post-Soviet space. It's going to be around Georgia and South Ossetia, Georgia and Abkhazia. It's going to be around Moldavia and with Romania against Transnistria, and to a very likely degree, it's going to be attempts to further destabilize and to set fire to Central Asia. Okay, with the help of one form of use radical Islamism or whatnot. Why did the Americans leave Afghanistan? It's to turn it into another like boiling cauldron of chaos that can then spill somewhere else, and somewhere else is north. Okay, it has to spill north. Then what Washington wants is to give Russia not a two-front war, but something even more multidimensional to deal with. Okay, there's some people in Russia you hear that, well, this like Nagorno-Karabakh situation, okay, it's why should it be of Russia's concern that the current prime minister of Armenia, Nikol Pashinyan, it's this whole catastrophe is one of his making, and he's trying to push Armenia out of the all of the pro-Russian structures, out of the collective security treatment organization, wants to tie it to NATO, all these things, and so at one point, well, why should Russia be even involved? And the answer is, well, Russia has to be involved in a conflict that is very close to it, B, deals with people, especially those people in Nagorno-Karabakh, who we made a certain promise to, in terms of that we're going to not allow their blood to be spilled, and they believed us. Okay, you have to if you make promises, you have to keep them, because otherwise your word means nothing. Okay, and in that situation, you can't be the empire of truth that can wage a real multi-dimensional war against an empire of lies, because you're just as big a liar as they are. Okay, so in that situation, you have to confirm that you exist. Okay, and that's why it's important, because otherwise the next step is, you allow blood to be spilled close to your border. Next time the blood's going to be spilled inside your border. And I think everybody who makes decisions, who understands what's at stake, it's something everybody gets.
I want to finish on this note, Lev. We've been talking about these regional conflicts and the rebirth, the resurrection of previous conflicts. But one thing that I have been concerned about for a number of years now, and it's intensifying, is the scale and the frequency of the US NATO war games in the Black Sea, all along Russia's borders, and in the Arctic on a 24/7 basis. These war games are planning a direct attack on Russia by land. They plan that. They plan these games to do that on the sea, the Arctic, the Black Sea, and in the air with long-range bombers that are nuclear capable, as well as fighter jets that are nuclear capable of taking off from Romania, from Poland, from God knows where else. And these games have got to appear to Russia as one day representing the real thing. Your thoughts on this before we finish, Lev?
You know, Donald Rumsfeld said, that weakness is provocative. Okay. And, all this telegraphing that you see, it means one thing. Okay. It means that, they're pressed for time because they have to defeat us before they can go head-to-head with China. At least that's the current thinking in the current administration. I don't know what might surface, later in like after 2024, but this democratic, Langley establishment is convinced that before the terminal confrontation with China, they have to finish Russia off. Okay, and whether or not they try to go for it really depends on one thing. It's their perception of the winnability of such a war in conditions that satisfy them, okay, that they see as acceptable, okay, and that's the whole thing. You have to demonstrate that you exist, that attempts to wage this kind of war to finish you off are not going to end well for the side that decides to launch it. Because not only do you have the means to inflict unacceptable damage to the other side, but you also have the willpower to do it. Okay, nobody cares that you have a gun in your hand if they are convinced that you don't have the balls to pull the trigger. If both of those conditions are met, then the enemy is going to think twice before he does something to test your capabilities and your resolve. The moment that either one of those comes into doubt, that's when they're going to jump.